What happens in the sky affects life down here on Earth. The celestial compass shows you how and guides your way with astrology you can use from professional astrologer Kathy Beal. Every episode features her light-hearted, practical forecasts and navigational tips, blended with humor, optimism, and a love of patterns, symbolism, and pop culture references. Kathy translates technicalities into concepts that apply to real life. You'll learn how the current moment ties to where we've been, from the recent past to cycles that last happened years ago, and get a look at where we're heading. And much more, from special topics to special guests. The Celestial Compass, enlightening, entertaining, and empowering. Here's your host, Kathy Beal.
Greetings, Earthlings. It's Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net. We're going to talk today about Kabbalah, astrology, and tarot, oh my, with my dear friend Donna Woodwell, who is a frequent guest and always a favorite. But first, a brief update of the forecast for the month, which you can find at Om Times and also at my site, EmpowermentUnlimited.net. This week, we're in a stretch of dealing with, looking at, possibly assimilating some of the really, really deep level emotional and structural restructuring we've all been going through since really the end of last October, but this is the cleanup time for the Capricorn full moon of last week, and we will hear, see, think about a lot of very important revelations, information, secrets coming to light, developments, like the ultimate end game of a lot of things that have been going on, and we'll see what we can and can't do about them. And then everybody gets really, really energized. We're going into a shift from tender Cancer energy into a high level of Leo energy. Mercury and the Sun are both moving into Leo. At the same time, the planet that is kind of our social director, Venus, moves into Cancer and continues our desire to take comfort in food and nurture each other, at least nurture ourselves, and to there'll be this odd paradox of wanting to stay at home and wanting to go out and get noticed quite a bit. As we move toward the end of the month, the conversation, the information flow, both get really, really fractious and impassioned, and we'll have a lot of fighting words and putting ideas into action and demanding that people actually do things, leading us into the Leo new moon of the 28th, which causes everybody's inner child to get an extra big bowl of Wheaties and decide that we want to really, really, really be seen. This is in a relationship with Jupiter, the guy that wants to make everything bigger. So your desire to strut your stuff, to be seen, to go out and play, to take the limelight, or the spotlight, I guess is a more appropriate word these days, will get stronger and stronger and stronger, and I will add an advisory for high levels of drama coming down the pike. And again, you can check all this out at EmpowermentUnlimited.net and at Om Times. And enough of the forecasting, on to the fun. If you're intrigued by all the magical things you stumble across, astrology, of course you are if you're listening to this, tarot, spells, and more, but you're still scratching your head as to how all this stuff works, wonder no longer. Kabbalah is the secret sauce that pulls it all together, revealing mysteries like how you can unlock your full potential and use magic to create the life of your dreams. And we have, to explain how to do this, Donna Woodwell, creator and teacher of the Magic of Kabbalah course. Bit about Donna: though she attended grad school to become a foreign correspondent, she had no idea how foreign that'd get, After exploring ancient and modern astrological, magical, and mystical practices for more than 25 years, she teaches witches, pagans, and astrologers how to unleash their unique genius into the world. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you, Kathy, for having me.
Oh, always fun. We always get very good feedback from people who listen. So, yay.
Yay!
How did you, so tell us about your path to Kabbalah.
There are so many things to study in the New Age section of the bookstore. I'm sure if you've been there, I've been there, other people go, there's like a wall of books of many different kinds. And it can feel overwhelming at first, like, oh my God, what do I do with all this information? Where do I start? And if you're lucky, and maybe if in our half-price books here, the New Age section is next to the religious section, maybe you saw some books on Kabbalah in there, and maybe you wandered over to them. Well, and you might have looked at it, and if you did, you were like, well, I don't understand. This is just one more thing for the pile. I am not attracted to this at all. Well, here's the thing. I was exactly like that. I had Kabbalah on my list for a long time because when you study magic, people mention it here and there. I didn't even see the point. The little bit I knew about Kabbalah, it was like a Jewish mystical thing, and clearly it had nothing to do with tarot. It had nothing to do with the astrology that I loved or anything else. Until much later in my studies, compared to everything else I've looked at, I came across someone talking about a hermetic interpretation of the tarot. And that's just a fancy buzzword for saying, a hermetic interpretation of the Kabbalah. And that's just a fancy way of talking about what happened to this unique model of the cosmos that grew up in the context of the mystical tradition of the Jewish faith, was adopted by magicians and astrologers in the middle part of the Renaissance as the Christmas tree, pun intended, as like the tree that would hold up all of their magical interpretations and let them all cross-link to each other. So when we talk about the tarot today, for example, the tarot we have, the modern tarot, is an explanatory tool for the Kabbalah. So if you don't understand the Kabbalah, you don't understand why the tarot is the way it is. For planets, the planets in essence are the fruits of the tree of life, the cosmic pattern of the Kabbalah. So if you don't understand how all those planets relate to each other in the Kabbalah, you don't understand how to use the planets as a tool for your personal enlightenment. And you really don't understand how books like Cornelius Agrippa and Paracelsus and other people in the magical tradition were doing their magic, because it's held together with the glue that is the Kabbalah. So I know that's a lot, but that's the core. It's the secret sauce.
It's the secret sauce, but how did you find it? You were standing in Half Price Books and you found a book and finally said, okay, I will look at this?
I could not tell you that, because for me, it was like the last thing that got on the list, and I didn't actively go out and say, "Ooh, I am going to be an expert in the Hermetic Kabbalah." It just didn't cross my mind, and it really wasn't until I had dove into everything astrological, everything tarot. And again, you walk around in magical circles and people talk about the Kabbalah and they learn Hebrew. If you're reading traditional magic that's written in the Renaissance, you can't escape it. But I just looked at it, I'm like, I am not learning Hebrew. I'm just not learning another language. It's just too much for me. So I just kept putting it off and putting it off. And so when everything else was finished, I'm like, all right, I'm going to take a moment and I'm going to figure out what this Hermetic Kabbalah is. And so I actually pulled books off my shelf that I had for years, like Dion Fortune's Mystical Kabbalah, and I started rereading it. I'm like, oh my God, this makes sense now. You know how it is? You can buy books 20 years ago, and you read them, and you're like, I don't really get it. But now I'm like reading them with all the grounding and all the background to understand what they're trying to say. I'm like, oh my God, why didn't anybody teach this to me in the very beginning? This would have saved me a lot of trouble in all of the studies that I was doing, because it links them together. And you know, like how astrology and tarot relate to each other from the beginning, because they're related through the Kabbalah. So I don't have an easy answer to that. I just have I learned all this stuff, and eventually by learning all of this stuff, the pattern that connects them was like, oh, wait, that's what they meant. The Kabbalah is the thing that connects them all. I get it. And so once I got it, it was just like unleashing the floodgates.
Yeah, now I must tell everybody. For starters, why is this word spelled so many ways?
Oh, that's easy. There's a reason. So, first of all, Hebrew, traditional Hebrew, is a shorthand alphabet for Egyptian hieroglyphs. That's where the roots of Hebrew came from. Like, it's because carving out hieroglyphs on stone tablets takes an awful lot of time, and so they learned how to, like, extract them. And they would write from right to left because they were chipping it out in stone. And if you try to chip from left to right, you're more likely to bang your hand with the hammer, and that's bad. So you have to go the other direction. So these shorthands, they didn't have vowels in them. And since they didn't have vowels, words can be pronounced a whole bunch of different ways with just 3 letters. So let's just imagine the word duck. I mean, if you put in an E, it's deck. If you put in a U, it's duck. And if you put in other things, it becomes less available for radio. So Hebrew itself, in its original form, oldest form, which is the form that they were writing about the Kabbalah, doesn't have vowels. And so there's no, and plus it's not written in English language, there's no one right way to spell things. So what people in the last 50 years or so have learned how to do, if they know the system, if Kabbalah is spelled with a K, they're talking about traditional Jewish Kabbalah. If Kabbalah is spelled with a C, they're talking about the Christianized version of the Kabbalah. And if Kabbalah is spelled with a Q, they're talking about the Hermetic version of the Kabbalah. Now, not everybody uses it this way, but enough people who work with the Kabbalah understand this convention that most of the time that will be correct.
Thank you. All right. That sums it up really nicely. So in theory, it depends on which way you're actually using the system. That would be
so
what
I have 2 books on my counter that say, The Essential Kabbalah by Daniel Matt and Practical Kabbalah by Rabbi Wolf. These 2 are spelled with the K because they're in the traditional Jewish canon of discussion about Kabbalah. So if you pick up Dion Fortune's The Mystical Kabbalah, or reads The Witch's Kabbalah, or Gareth Knight's A Practical Guide to the Kabbalistic Tradition, all those are spelled with a Q because they're all about Hermetic magic in the Kabbalah. So they're going to talk about tarot, and they're going to talk about planets and astrology. So if you're using Kabbalah like I am, for magic and astrology and linking these things together, find the versions that start with the Q because they will help you the most.
Very good. All right. Very helpful. So you call this, you have many different shorthand descriptions for it on your site about your course. And one of them is a roadmap. And we've got like 2.5 minutes or so before we go into break. So have at it.
Okay. The central image of the Kabbalah is a tree, what's called the Tree of Life. And the Tree of Life is what's called a cosmograph. So it is an image of how the human psyche relates to the divine. Basically, it's a process by which the divine oneness of all things, Om, overflows itself to become the world of archetypes. And the world of archetypes overflows itself, turns into time, and creates this interlocking web of spiritual formation, which eventually overflows itself to become the dense material reality that is us. So it's a one seamless picture of reality that's very similar to the kinds of pictures of reality they have in all kinds of traditions around the world. And this model becomes a way of understanding not only how we can ascend to a higher place, but also how we can use our knowledge of how the cosmos works to make magic in our own lives.
To bring it down into the material plane.
Exactly. Yeah, whatever you learn how to climb up, you can also learn how to climb down.
Okay, all right. Well, that was a much quicker explanation of roadmap than I was expecting.
You told me 2 minutes, and I did it in maybe...
Yeah, a minute. Personal challenge. This is great. All right, so you also call it a system of practices for integrating mind, heart, and soul.
Yes, because it's also ancient psychology. So each piece of the Kabbalah represents a piece of ourselves, and when you know how the pieces fit together, you can use them much more efficiently and consciously.
And that is a beautiful place for a break. I'm going to stop us right here. We'll be back very, very shortly. Hang in, everybody. Want help with your own celestial compass? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, for Astro Insight forecasts for each week, month, and new and full moon. Want to explore the personal impact? Make a decision? Understand another person? It is possible. Click the Services tab to book a personal session with me. That address again? empowermentunlimited.net. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We are talking today with Donna Woodwell about Kabbalah and how it fits in with astrology and tarot and magic and life here, down here on Earth. So we were talking just before the break about how it's a way of actually understanding yourself a lot better, integrating mind, heart, and soul.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. So then let's move on. There's nothing more you want to say about that. One thing, anybody who has kind of, even if you just dabble in the tarot, you come across references to certain cards having images that line up with elements in other systems. And the one that comes to mind to me is the Ten of Pentacles, where the arrangement of the pentacles, the overlay of the pentacles on the card, is said to be a representation of the tree of life. So there's a correspondence of symbols among all of these systems.
There is a huge correspondence of symbols. In essence, modern tarot has been retconned to fit into the tree of life. They redesigned the images on the tarot cards enough that they become a one-to-one correspondence with the tree. So first, let's describe the tree. The tree is 10 circles. 10 circles. They're called sephirot in plural. Each one of these 10 circles represents one of the planets with a few extras, one that represents the Earth, and the one doesn't get a planet, and the zodiac's in there too. But basically, it's Mercury, Sun, Venus, Mars, and the rest of them. They're all energy centers, and they're vibrating to hold us in alignment with the powers that be. Between each of these circles is a pathway. Every path connects two of these circles. There are 22 pathways. When Kabbalah was first evolving, the people in the Jewish tradition recognized that there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. There are 22 connecting paths. Ergo, there's a relationship, 22 and 22. Well, when we got to the 17th century, this French guy, Cote who actually knew Benjamin Franklin, of all people, who was in that salon circle of the late 1700s in Paris. And he wrote a book called The Monde Primitif. And in that book, he talked about, okay, the tarot has 22 cards in it in the major arcana, and the Kabbalah has 22 paths. We should link up the 22 paths in the tarot to the 22 paths in the Kabbalah, because then everything plays nice with everything else. And so at that moment in time, tarot got really crystallized into this is tarot. Before that, tarot, some decks had 4 cards, some decks had fewer, but that was what really standardized the text. That's why tarot decks have 22 major arcana cards, because there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and there are 22 paths on the Kabbalah. So he was so excited that this passed down through the generations, and people like Eliphas Levi, who was writing about all things metaphysical in the 1800s, was adopted by the Golden Dawn. Golden Dawn was a Hermetic order of magicians in the early part of the 1900s, late part of the 1800s, who devised their entire magical system to be reflective of the secrets that are in the Kabbalah. And in order to make it easy for everybody who was in the system to be able to work with their ideas, they carefully redrew the images of the Kabbalah from the historic versions that Pamela Coleman Smith could dig up to make them in alignment closer to the path of the Kabbalah as the way Arthur Waite understood them. So the reason that the tarot cards have the divination meanings that they do is that they've been filtered through the lens of the Kabbalah in the view of the Golden Dawn. And of course, those Golden Dawn decks that came out there, they were the birth of the modern tarot. Most modern tarot decks use them as the prototype. And so sometimes people are designing tarot decks. They don't even know why they're designing them other than, well, that's what they use, so that's what I'll use, because that's what tarot is. Well, if they had come to my class, they would know this is Kabbalah. That's what you start to understand when you really get into what the Kabbalah is.
I did not know that there was a correspondence with every single card in the major arcana. That makes complete sense, because earlier decks there were a lot of cards that ended up not in the current deck. I mean, the number of the major trumps would alter, vary, depend on. And the ones that lost out were the ones that didn't fit in the map of the Kabbalah. Well. Who knew? Yeah. Well. And all of those weird things you see if you happen to be reading, like, I don't know, Aleister Crowley's version of the tarot, or you read something that says, the Hierophant is Taurus. And you're like, what the hell is a Hierophant Taurus? If you bend over backwards to turn yourself into a pretzel to try to figure out why those two cards are related. Well, they're only related because if you number the pass on the tree of life, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in order, and then you put the zodiac signs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, and skip some because of various reasons. Taurus just happens to fall on the card for the Hierophant. They don't have anything thematically to do with each other. That's just the order that fate had them fall in. So it also explains why some things seem so weird until you realize that for the people who designed the system, they weren't designing it all for consistent meaning. They were designing it so that everything had a corollary. So that if you knew you were a Taurus and you just needed some card, you knew which one to pick because it was the same one that was reflected through the Kabbalah. So it answers all the weird things that you never knew you needed to know or wanted to know. Mm-hmm. Like, why is this here? Okay. All right. Does this have anything to do with some of the decks switching justice and strength?
Yes. There was a debate back in Arthur Waite's time. He decided he didn't like some things, and he made some changes to make them fit into his system a little bit better. And yes, they directly relate to the Kabbalah, because when you understand the system, and Kabbalah, as I said, is a tool for reaching enlightenment and creating magic. So when you look at all the paths that are represented by tarot cards, they are describing psychological states that you need to master in order to move deeper into your own enlightenment. And the cards were placed where they are because they're designed to be states of awareness. Like the Hermit. The Hermit is where it is because it's the state of mind where you are learning to move the last state where you're moving from your sense of your higher self into the place of the ascended masters. And just for oversimplification. And so we see the hermit standing on the top of the cliff because that's representing the ascent to the ascended masters. So we have to do with divine compassion and all these other things. So once you learn this system, you realize there's so much potential you haven't even thought about, because all of a sudden, a draw of the tarot deck is not just representing some physical stuff in your three-dimensional life. It's representing where you are on the map of consciousness that is represented by the tree of life. So you know if you're just dealing with more personal stuff, like, oh, your thoughts fighting with your emotions, or if you have like a deeper psychological issue or parapsychological issue where you're learning how to, work between the essential duality of trust in the oneness of the cosmos and the need to manifest as an individual. All of that's laid out once you understand how the systems work together.
So, assuming, I would think that many people listening to this have somewhat of an understanding of at least one of the areas that you've been talking about, astrology or tarot. So if they come into this, I don't know whether you think it might be an easier process of learning. Would it be something like snapping what you already know into a grid work and going, oh, there's that. Oh, I didn't see that. Oh, or am I oversimplifying the possibilities here?
I've had many students already go through my Magic of Kabbalah course, and they're coming from all different places. Some people don't know any astrology. Some people know a lot of it. Some people are like diehard magicians, and some people are like, not so much. So I think if you have had some metaphysical training and you've at least looked at tarot or you've looked at astrology, once you understand how all these pieces together, you're like, oh my God, I had no idea all of this was there. And just like any symbolic language, I was thinking about this the other day. I knew only Kathy would appreciate this, that the mirepoix of magic is astrology, Kabbalah, and tarot. So if you want the essential stuff that makes all magic hold together, you must understand the language of astrology, and you must understand the language of Kabbalah. And tarot is kind of a shorthand version for both of those things. So it's useful, but not quite as essential as the other two. But if you don't understand those languages, you can't read any magic spells. You don't know what they're saying. All you see is a list of ingredients, and you have no foundational knowledge for why that list is there. But if you know Kabbalah and you know the language of astrology, you can not only decode everything that's written, you can write your own. You can go, oh, wait, I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have swapped this out with that, and poof. So you go from being like someone who just follows the recipes to someone who can actually cook. And that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, I know how easy it is for me now. You cook for the house for like 30 years. All of a sudden, you're just like, I don't need a recipe anymore. I can take this ingredient, and I know these will go together because of blah, blah, blah. And it opens up a whole new layer of possibilities. And that's why Kabbalah is so very, very powerful in a sneaky way, is because it gives you a theoretical underpinning to how to live life, how to work within yourself, and how to harness all of these things, astrology, tarot, for like an extra lift as you work through the world.
I don't even know where to take this. Okay,
it's the hardest thing to talk about because it's just on the edge of it's not in popular culture this way. I mean, you see actresses and actors talking about it. Like, hey, I went to the Kabbalah Study Center, and you're like, oh yeah, they must be doing something spiritual. Well, what they're doing is learning how to master themselves. They're learning how to do thought work, control their emotions, in order to give themselves a lift and connect to their higher self and pull in the energy of their higher self more and be more present in their daily lives. And if you're doing it in Hermetic Kabbalah, you're doing it in the language of tarot and the planet.
So, to keep this from overwhelming someone who's first hearing about it, how do you don't have to learn Hebrew, right? I mean, that seems like an obvious.
No.
Okay.
I know. In my class, I gave people a 10-minute introduction to Hebrew just so they would no longer be afraid of it. But I don't use any in my class, and you don't have to, other than as like labels, just like you use, Gemini and Virgo and blah, blah, blah. You can use those labels as placeholders for a whole bunch of other things, but you don't have to use the labels. You can also use past 22, or you could use like the name of the tarot cards to hold all the stuff together. So there's really no reason you have to. You certainly don't have to speak it.
Okay. All right. So that's the first hurdle down. How does somebody approach this without just sitting there and going, this is way too hard for me? I mean, bite-sized little baby steps to try to integrate it, or at least get familiar with it. Okay, there we go. That's the word.
There you go. Kabbalah itself is a vision. It's a holistic vision of how all the pieces fit together. But how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So if you want to learn Kabbalah, most of the books will walk you through step by step. The best book I can recommend for pure beginners is Milo Duquette's book, Chicken Kabbalah. It's written in accessible language. It just scratches the surface, but it's actually kind of funny. So Chicken Kabbalah, and it would be where I would start if you don't want to take a big course, you just want to taste. There aren't that many books on Hermetic Kabbalah that are really good. He lists some of them in his work because this is really, it's been around for about 300 years in like a written form, and the best books have come out in the last 80 or so. So you have to know what you're looking for. But if you understand the planets, you will look at it and go, wait. Qabala, that's Mars. Oh, I understand Mars. Mars is hot, aggressive, assertive, courageous. That's Mars. That's Qabala. So, I mean, it doesn't take long to learn once you understand how they map together if you've had some basic experience in either astrology or tarot. And it opens up so many possibilities, like if each of those energy centers is a planet, let's say the Sun and Venus. The path between the Sun and Venus is the star, the major arcana card, the star. So if you're having Sun-Venus issues in your chart, like you're having a transit of the Sun to Venus on your natal chart, you can pull out the star card, and that's the energetic key to resolving the duality of the energies between Sun-Venus. And every single pair of planets has a major arcana card that serves as the key. So if you're stuck on planets, like, all right, I'm having Mars transit my Saturn and I feel cruddy and I don't know what to do, that's the Chariot. You pull out the Chariot card, you meditate on the Chariot as a way to enter in to the dialogue on how to resolve deeper energies. So you start at the beginning, you learn the different pieces, you go back, you learn to put them all together, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I get it. And you get very excited.
So, okay, so I'm getting very excited at this one concept that you just threw into this, which is every pair of planets has a mediating energy?
Yes.
There's a conduit. Yes. There's something that will run interference between them. How? That will show you how to manifest it in a different kind of way. And essentially, the inner planets, Moon, Mercury, and Venus kind of all hooked together, and the outer planets kind of all hooked together. And the Sun acts as the main mediator between things. So if there's not a direct path between them, so like you have to say, like the Moon doesn't directly connect to Saturn. You have to go Moon, Sun, Saturn, or Moon, Mars, Saturn. You have to make an extra jump. Gives you 2 cards to work with. But it gives you a path and a different way to think about the energies that is
incredibly creative because all those tarot cards, they're archetypes. And they're archetypes designed for this process. That's the real thing. That totally blew my mind. I'm like, wait, the tarot cards aren't just random things. They were random, and they've been like a sculpture that someone's been chipping away for generations. And what we see now as tarot, the final product, is the one that's the keys for the Kabbalah, because they did it on purpose.
And with that, we're going to take our second break. Everybody, hang out. You want to know where this is going. How would you like navigational tools you can use on your own? Visit my site, empowermentunlimited.net, and click the Shop tab. There you'll find lots of talks and guides explaining the big influences at work now, like Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. You'll also find a variety of guided visualizations for relaxing, clearing your energy, or getting to know planetary archetypes. That address again, empowermentunlimited.net. Welcome back to Celestial Compass. We're talking with Donna Woodwell about Kabbalah and so many more things. Before the break, you were clarifying, elaborating on how the current version, modern versions of tarot were basically reshaped or sculpted like a statue with the Kabbalah correspondences in mind, guiding the actual structure of the major arcana. Is there much of an influence on the minor cards?
Yes. There's also a direct influence on those because, as I said before, there are 10 sephirot, 10 energy centers that represents, I don't know, kind of like the dimensions that we live in. Energy centers, planets, however you want to think about it. Well, there are 10 cards plus the court cards in the tarot, 1 through 10. And so if you have 10 levels of energy and 10 things, each of the 10, starting at the ace is the oneness of all things, all the way down to the 10 at the bottom, the earthy side of all things. They're all associated with the corresponding energy center. The only difference is there's like, the tarot isn't just one thing, it's a map that you stamp on things. So one of the maps is stamped on earth, and one of the maps is stamped on fire. One of the maps is stamped on airy things, and another one is stamped on watery things. And so each one of those minor arcana cards represents those energy centers vibrating in different elements. And yes, the court cards have a place too. They are representing the 4 primary worlds of Kabbalah. The earth is the earthy world. Water is the world of formation. Water is the world of creation, let me put it that way. Air is the world of fashioning things, how things are patterned to make them physical, and fire is the ultimate divine world. So there's like meaning behind all of them, which is why the images on the Kabbalah cards, the minor arcana cards, Pamela Coleman Smith, when she designed her version, drew heavily on Kabbalah. So if you lay them all out in the right pattern, some of the ways that the people are like holding their arms and stuff is indicating the path that they're representing on the tree. So it's really cool when you see them spread. You're like, oh my God, they like the whole thing are like pieces of a puzzle, and you never had the image on the box of the puzzle before until you had the Kabbalah.
That's such an evocative way to put it. All right, so the Kabbalah is the box cover, and then you get to look at everything with that in mind. All right, so it's not just random and the 10 of Pentacles. Oh, suddenly the Kabbalah shows up. Whoa, it's everywhere.
I know,
wow.
I know. It sounds so airy-fairy until you learn it and see it in action. It's the same way astrology sounds all airy-fairy until you see it in action, and then you're like, I can use this. Because, like, absolute genius in the way they put it together. So, for example, like describing the human condition down here below, they had the sense of there was a central organizing thing called the imagination. The imagination is the mind space in which our sensations from our physical world, our thoughts coming in from our talking minds, and our emotional reactions are all swirled together to create a sense of a reality bubble in our imagination. And that then is if you can calm down the noise from all these sensory stuff and the thoughts and the emotions, it can be the clear reflection for the higher self to come and speak to you once you get all the other stuff out of the way. And the higher self is represented by the sun, that imagination space is represented by the moon, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I get it in ways that you didn't before. So like, it forms the basis for things like meditation and thought work and shadow work and all kinds. It gives you a starting point to reflect on them all. It's just brilliant.
I'm okay. I have no words.
I know. This is the first interview I've done on this topic, so I have to learn how to speak about it, and not get too very excited. You teach whole classes on things and you don't actually boil them down into brass tacks. It is the most important thing that someone who loves Western magic could learn in order to explain everything that's going on. And I don't know how to prove that to people until after they've done it. And then they come back and say, this is the most important thing I've ever learned. Why didn't I know it before? And all I can say is it's one of those ideas that just hasn't had enough people to write popular books on it so that it's gotten popular press in a new age bookstore. It's not something that you can make a daily horoscope out of. It's a tool for living. But once you understand how powerful it is, I totally understand why magicians go gaga over it. And I wish I had learned soon. I wish I had listened to all of them, you need to learn this. Yeah, I don't want to. It's just more stuff, more yammer. And I was just wrong. And
well, that was always my reaction.
I was so, but you know what? We all learn at the state we need to learn. And so if I can convince somebody out there to pick up one book on the Hermetic Kabbalah, especially if they're an astrologer or a tarot reader, I did my job.
And you are an enthusiastic advocate for this, and also a very good teacher. So you've got a class on this. Tell us about your course.
I do. I have a 12-week course to help you master everything I just talked about. That dives a little bit more into the history so you can have a context for what we're talking about. And then we work down the tree and we look at all of the energy centers and put them in the context of planets. Then we work back up the tree and we look at all of the paths that connect them and we put them in the context of tarot cards. And along the way, we are constantly learning meditation techniques, guided visualizations that help you actually experiment with the energy for themselves. And then at the end of the course, we spend 3 weeks in practical applications for this. The first one is in your tarot readings, how you can use your new Kabbalistic knowledge to understand how you read the tarot cards, a Kabbalistic tree of life spread, and everything else. 1 week on astrology and Kabbalah so that you can do exactly what I said. All right, you have these two planets. They're in aspect to one another. What's the card that connects them? How does that relate to the astrology reading that you're going to give someone else or yourself? And finally, how you use astrology, Kabbalah, and magic. Use it for talismans and understanding spells and creating your own rituals. And we wrap it all up with a little bow that encourages you to continue to go forth and do one of the greatest magical applications of the West, connecting to your holy guardian angel, which is just a fancy way of saying how you connect to your higher self so you can bring more divine light into your daily life.
And I'll just say that all of your courses come with the most exquisitely designed workbooks that are very, very easy to follow. They're not overwhelming. They're ones that you can save on your computer if you don't want to clutter your house up with paper, although I personally find it easy to print it out and make my own scribbles in it.
I know. If you look at all of my classes, I know they total up over 1,000 pages of things right now. So they're all designed, if you're digital friendly, to just They all have writing spaces so you can like digitally type on them, or you can use your tablet and handwrite on them if you wish. Either way, everything goes together because I want you to walk away with your own book of shadows, your own recipe book for designing the magical life of your dreams. Print out what you like, leave what you don't. At the end, you will come up with an amazing book of shadows that encompasses everything you would need to know for your magical journey.
So let's define a very simple term here, and that is magical. A lot of people have a Harry Potter image of this and waving their wand around and things materializing in the air, which would be cool.
It'd be cool, but not something that's terribly, not something you're going to see in our three-dimensional world.
That is correct. So I should have probably started this much earlier. Would you define magic?
Magic is actually really easy to define in the context of the Kabbalah. Magic presumes that we have a vertical dimension, that everything that we experience comes from the one, it's filtered down through the land of archetypes, all kinds of spirits, our higher selves, creating the blueprints and templates of things that eventually crystallize into what we experience down here on Earth. Magic is simply the conscious act of changing the template so what you manifest down here on Earth changes. So if you're going to do spells and things, most of them involve doing things like either visualizing a shift in that probability matrix so that you can manifest something different, or building like a little decoy down here. Like if you want more money in your life, you build a little symbolic representation of what abundance looks like to you, and you get the help of the planets like Jupiter, who likes to increase things, or gold, because gold is the foundation of money. Anyway, you build a little decoy so that your change and concept has a guide wire to know how to manifest here on Earth. That's essentially what every magical book will tell you. They just won't tell it to you what they're actually doing. They'll just give you a recipe for how to build the decoy. But what you're doing is working on a deeper level, change the pattern in order to change your reality.
Which is not waving a wand, darn it, and having things materialize in the air.
No,
and
it's more about changing your mindset.
That's where I was heading.
But like on steroids. Changing your mindset and then making a physical representation of it so you have a subconscious reminder of the direction that you want to go in, because let's face it, most of us can't walk through the house, get to the other room, and wonder why we went in there in the first place. If you've ever gotten up from your desk and went in the kitchen and went, why did I come in here? And had to go back to your desk to sit down until, oh yeah, I came in here for blah, and then you have to go back. Our brains are so mushy and inattentive. It's helpful to have like physical things that say, I'm going to staple myself here and make this happen.
So magic really is directed at yourself.
Well, yes, with the caveat that yourself is much bigger than you give it credit for. And allowing the universe, other forces in the universe that are divine like you, to help you manifest in concert.
I'll accept that. That makes sense.
Co-creation. It's about co-creation.
Co-creation. Got it. Okay.
Conscious, sophisticated co-creation.
And it does require, I'm just going to hammer on this, your own participation in it.
Absolutely.
You don't just, I've got this little recipe and I go bing and then I walk away from it. You are in it and you are part of what is being acted on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
I had a roommate who lived downstairs and wanted to sublet her apartment. She's devout Catholic, and she's like, I'm not worried. I prayed. I'm going to have someone sublet this apartment. And I said, did you put up advertisements? She said, no, because I prayed. And I said, don't you think it'll be easier for God to find you someone to sublet if you actually advertise? She's like, well, maybe. So magic requires our co-creation, because spirit doesn't help people who do nothing.
I heard somebody once say, God expects you to not be stupid. Like if you're just sitting back and and that you can just hand it over to him. That's a good example with the ad. Well, all right. So any wrapping up comments you'd like to make about any of this?
I just hope everyone walked away from this episode with a larger understanding of Kabbalah is cool. Go find the Kabbalah with a Q, especially if you love Western magic. It is totally worth investing the time to learn what it is, because once you get all the pieces down, you go like, wow. There's not a day that goes by since I learned how all this put together. I spend more time thinking about how the Kabbalah works than I do whatever the daily transits are going on in astrology, which is saying something, because, I've spent years as an astrologer.
Yeah, that's astonishing.
Kabbalah is more useful when it comes to fundamental core understandings of how you work. And astrology is super useful on the temporary back and forth of things, but if you really want to understand how all the pieces fit together, Kabbalah is the tree, astrology is the leaves on the tree.
I was thinking more like, that makes complete sense. I was thinking a grid, and astrology is a piece of the grid.
Yes, it's an important part of the grid. It's the, the planets are the energy centers. So the planets have been around longer than astrology has, but the energy centers of the planets and the tree of life grew up together, and they're one seamless whole. And they let you use astrology in a totally, they move you towards astral theurgy, using astrology as a tool for your personal enlightenment.
And with that, would you tell people where they can find you and where they can find out about your course? I will put that, actually, that's in the show description, the direct link to your course.
But if you want to find me, my website is www.magicandmastery.com. And all my stuff is there, but definitely check out the show notes for the link to the course, because you are all invited.
And you have a number of associated Facebook groups. You also run a coven. You have a coven that people can join.
Yeah, actually, I am about ready. Like in a week or two, I'm launching a second membership group. I'm launching a new membership group called the Society for Hour Keepers, which is for people who just want to follow the moon and tune in to the spiritual energy of the moon from week to week. And then for those who really want to dive into the study of magic, like intensely, I have a Magic and Mastery Coven, which is not only got like 48 hours of courses, it's also got discounts on all the classes that I run.
Thanks very much for being here, Donna. It's always a blast talking to you. All right. Check out my forecast at empowermentunlimited.net and Om Times, and I'll talk to you again soon.